Time to get down to business. Owen here. Markets not long open. French likely to get a bit of attention today, in fact, because we've got confirmation that growth, well, it's flatlining here.
We knew it already, Stuart, but we got confirmation once again from the Bank of France that it thinks that growth for the first quarter here in France will be flat, 0% growth. Remember, in the last quarter, the French had just 0.2% growth. To you and I, Stuart, that might not be technically a recession, but it's sure going to feel a bit like one with such low numbers. It'll be interesting to see how those presidential candidates try and spin that one out on the campaign trail. So the CAC 40 started the day around 1.3% down. It has come off those lows, as have the rest of the European markets. It's the usual story. They've all been away. They've had the best part of 4 days off for the Easter weekend, so things looking a little bit flat. The Asian markets still pretty choppy. They were back at their desk yesterday, but nevertheless not really turning any great gains. The Nikkei up for most of the session, actually closed the day 0.1% down. I will just mention while we're talking markets, Bloomberg have been talking to sources close to CVC Capital. That's the private equity firm that's the majority shareholder in Formula One. Seem to think they can raise around $2 billion by selling a 20% stake in their share of Formula One. That's all part of a drive, no pun intended, to try and float Formula One on the Singapore Stock Exchange, maybe around $10 billion. We await the details of that one, and we'll keep an eye on it for you.
And we've also had the first big acquisition of the course. This is Facebook. They bought Instagram.
Yeah, barely 2 years old, Stuart. Perhaps not that well known, but certainly well known enough to have Barack Obama among those who are subscribing to it. Very influential. It currently has nearly 30 million users, and that's partly why it's attracted the attention of one Mark Zuckerberg, who snapped it up and made millionaires out of its founders. Some analysts think that Facebook has overpaid for this application, but as is often the case with these technology firms, it's all about trying to stop the competition from getting an edge over you. Kate Moody has the story.
It's Facebook's biggest acquisition yet, $1 billion for Instagram, a free application on smartphones that was launched just 2 years ago. Instagram allows users to add filters to photos snapped on their mobile devices to give them a retro feel, and then share them easily on Facebook, Twitter, or other social networks. More than 30 million people use the application, and Apple named it iPhone App of the Year in 2011, making it a fairly safe bet for Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg. He pledged to continue to develop Instagram as an independent brand and said the takeover would complement Facebook's increasing focus on photo sharing. Analysts say it was also a ploy to keep the popular Instagram out of the hands of Facebook competitors like Google or the new site Pinterest. It's an investment Facebook can well afford, more than 8 years after it was launched as a tiny startup. It's expected to be valued at as much as $100 billion in an initial public offering of stock when it floats on the NASDAQ later this year.
Okay, we'll stay with the tech sector for a moment as we catch up on one or two more of the day's business headlines for you. Shares in AOL have nearly doubled in value. That's after a $1 billion technology transfer sale to Microsoft. Microsoft announced it's buying 800 patents from the internet service provider. The deal sent AOL shares surging more than 40% to close at just over $26 on Wall Street. Patent acquisition has become a valuable business as technology firms like Microsoft, Google, and Apple sue each other over copyright infringements.
Alcoa is expected to kick off a disappointing earnings season with a second consecutive loss. The world's biggest aluminium producer is forecast to report earnings of 4 cents a share compared to 27 cents for the same period in 2011. But Alcoa banking on an upturn in aluminium. China cuts unprofitable production and replaces it with foreign imports.
And Japan says it's closer to restarting the country's nuclear reactors for the first time since the Fukushima disaster. Ministers held talks overnight on switching on 2 reactors that have been stress tested since the Fukushima meltdown. Kansai Electric, one of the companies looking to restart nuclear power, has warned of power shortages in the high-demand summer months if all of its reactors remain offline.
Next, the starter of an all-nighter at Heathrow Airport. Emirates wants to break the curfew here.
This is what it's been telling reporters, Stuart, particularly the Financial Times. Its chief executive wants to, as you say, breach that curfew at Heathrow that's been in place for some time now. Extremely sensitive, very controversial. What's at stake here? Well, we're talking about one of the world's busiest airports, of course, Heathrow, some 70 million passengers. The problem with expanding capacity is that many airlines have to stop flying at around 11 o'clock at night. They can't really start again until 6 in the morning, bar around a dozen flights that are allowed to land in the small hours. That's pretty much it. Now, Emirates wants to extend that curfew so that it could keep taking off and keep landing planes as late as 1 a.m. and then start up again at 4 a.m. so you can see the window narrowing a lot. Now, they say they can do this because of that super jumbo. That's the Airbus A380. If you've ever travelled on one, you'll know how quiet they are to sit in. And they think that that plane, they can land that plane with a slightly steeper descent. They can land it a little bit further down the runway away from residential areas and thereby reduce the noise. And it has been proved in tests that the Airbus A380 is that little bit quieter, around 25% quieter than conventional planes.
As you said, that's hugely sensitive, isn't it? In Frankfurt Airport, they've just banned night flights and massive opposition as well in Britain, I would have thought, on the cards for this.
Well, I have to say, I think Emirates may have misjudged this one a little bit. When I spoke to them earlier this morning, they said, well, what's the big deal here? Dubai Airport, for example, has 24-hour flights. You're taking off and landing throughout the night. But the point is, it's hugely sensitive. Even the coalition government that's in power now in the UK, they were opposed to expanding Heathrow Airport, having a third runway, which would, of course, contributed to more noise. We've had pressure groups in the UK that have helped so far kill off these ideas. They'll be opposed to any kind of extension or breach of that curfew because of the impact that it will have on residential neighbourhoods. You've got the commercial pressures as well, though. You mentioned Frankfurt. Lufthansa, the main operator at Frankfurt, thinks that it's going to lose 40 million euros a year on its cargo operations because it can't fly through the night anymore. It's issued a profit warning. You've also got those commercial pressures perhaps at play in the UK, where Gulf Airlines can say, well, why don't you move your operations maybe to the Gulf, where you haven't got those restrictions in place, and you can land and take off through the night.
Quite hard to see London losing its preeminence just yet, though.
Well, I think that's been a bit exaggerated yet in terms of Gulf Airlines trying to attract business there. We have to remember London is ideally positioned as an international business centre with its time zone. It's got an attractive time zone, and Heathrow Airport serves nearly 200 airports around the world, so a really good range of destinations. I don't think Heathrow is going to lose its preeminence just yet.
We shall see. Now next, striking back in war-torn Afghanistan. The country's first bowling alley has opened its doors in Kabul. It's the brainchild of a young entrepreneur who decided that $1 million was a small price to pay for a bit of normality after decades of turmoil.
When Mina Rahmani returned to Kabul after almost 2 decades away, she realized something striking. There was nowhere for both men and women to hang out and have fun. In Afghanistan, many men still treat women as second-class citizens, but Rahmani, who is just 27 years old, is one of a growing number of female entrepreneurs fighting back against the system.
Most of the people around me, they were like, it's a risky thing that you're bringing. It's something new and Western in the country.
At the Strikers bowling alley, the security is tight, with armed guards searching guests for weapons and explosives. Last year, a nearby shopping mall was bombed twice by insurgents. Usually, men and women in Afghanistan do not mix, but here they bowl side by side.
Because all the time there are recreational areas, fun places, but it's only for men. Like if there's a swimming pool, it's for men. If it's a park, it's for men. This is the first time that I see there is an opportunity where like women can come as well.
Afghanistan has been racked by more than 3 decades of war, and the trauma, stress, and anxiety of everyday life can be difficult to escape. Unfortunately, at $35 an hour, this pastime is beyond the means of ordinary Afghans. And Kabul's unreliable electricity also means the 12 lanes often stop working. But Rahmani says the bowling center has nevertheless been a huge success. So much so that she's planning to start a league and hopes to open up other lanes across the country.
Yeah, good idea. Owen tells me I'm going to strike out and split. I have no idea what that means. No,
Normally you're the one for the bad puns. Not.
Thanks, Owen. He's back tomorrow morning, so am I. Melissa's got the latest headlines next. Stay with us.